On Tuesday night at exactly 11:47 p.m. My phone lit up with an incoming call. The screen showed, Jordan, Apple Watch. At first, I thought it was a mistake, maybe a pocket dial, but the detail caught my attention. It wasn't from her phone, but from her smartwatch. She was supposed to be at an informal meeting with colleagues. The kind she often described as casual networking over drinks. Nothing important. Still, something about the timing and the source of the call made me answer. What came through the speaker froze me in place. Instead of Jordan's voice, I heard the unmistakable hum of a bar. Glasses clinking, music beating faintly in the background, bursts of laughter too close to the microphone. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, barely breathing, and then a man's voice cut through the noise. Confident, relaxed, and just loud enough. After the bar, we'll continue in the room. The phrase was delivered with the kind of casual certainty that suggested this wasn't the first time. And then I heard Jordan's laugh. Not the polite chuckle she used in meetings. Not the forced laugh she sometimes gave on the phone with clients. It was the soft, playful laugh I knew too well. The one she used when she wanted to be liked, when she wanted to invite closeness. That laugh, in that context, said everything words couldn't. Before I could react, the line went dead. The call must have ended abruptly, either because the watch disconnected or because she realized it had dialed me. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, my phone still in my hand, heart pounding in my chest like I had sprinted a mile. My first thought was that I misheard, that I imagined the whole thing. But the sounds, the bar, the glasses, the laughter, that sentence about the room, they were too distinct to be a trick of the mind. And then, as if the universe wanted to strip away even the smallest excuse I could cling to, my inbox pinged. A new email, sent at 11:49 p.m. from Jordan's manager. The subject line read, "Tonight's session, postponed." The body of the email was short, apologetic, and final. He regretted that Jordan had missed the evening's scheduled work session, and they would reschedule for later. That was it. No ambiguity, no second interpretation. While she was in a bar with laughter, glasses, and the promise of a hotel room, her official work engagement had been canceled. I read the email 3 times, staring at the glowing letters in the otherwise silent kitchen. The contrast was unbearable. The image of Jordan networking at a bar might have been tolerable if there was still work attached to it. But this was just noise, drinks, and int asterisk Macy disguised as professional obligations. My mind replayed the call over and over, looping the sound of her laugh until it became unbearable. The night stretched on endlessly after that. I sat with the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional creak of the house. Everything was too still compared to the chaos running through my head. I knew what I heard, and yet I still tried to bargain with myself. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe it wasn't her laugh, but no, I knew it was. I could recognize it in a room full of 100 voices. Morning brought her performance. Jordan walked into the kitchen dressed sharply, her hair perfect, her suit light and polished. The kind of look that belonged in a glossy magazine, not in the office she claimed to be heading to. She didn't wait for me to speak. She launched straight into explanations, preemptive, almost rehearsed. She called it networking, a personal day, a chance to reconnect with colleagues outside the formality of the office. She used words like overload and stress, explaining that she needed the break, that her absence from the session wasn't negligence but self-care. Every phrase sounded ready-made, like lines she had prepared in her head during the ride home. I noticed the way she avoided silence, filling every gap before I could insert a question. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear at the exact moment she mentioned the informal meeting. The way she set down her coffee she normally skipped on stressful mornings, with unnecessary precision. None of it looked like the gestures of someone speaking casually. It looked like a defense strategy. And yet, through all the rationalizations, she tried to make me feel as though I was the irrational one. She framed the accidental call as meaningless background noise. She painted the manager's email as bad timing, nothing more. She pushed the narrative of exhaustion and heavy workload so firmly that if I hadn't heard the laugh, if I hadn't seen the email timestamp with my own eyes, I might have given in. But I had heard, I had seen, and that changed everything. I couldn't unhear the sentence about continuing in the room. I couldn't unsee the email confirming she had no professional obligation that night. Those two facts, tied together in the same hour, were too heavy to dismiss. They carved a crack in the foundation of our marriage, a crack that no carefully prepared words could fill. As I watched her move around the kitchen, as if nothing had happened, I realized something cold and certain. This was the first undeniable signal. A signal strong enough to shatter every convenient excuse I had built for her over the past months. I knew then that whatever lay ahead, this was the point of no return. After that night, after the call from Jordan's smartwatch and the mocking clarity of her laugh over a stranger's words, I couldn't go back to the comfort of ignorance. I had lived for months in a haze of small doubts, convincing myself that inconsistencies were just the friction of two people juggling careers, obligations, and stress. But once I had a solid anchor, a time, a sound, an email that contradicted her story, the memories I had buried began to surface, one by one, sharper than ever. Started with her phone. For years, we had both been careless about it. She would leave it charging in the kitchen overnight. I'd toss mine onto the coffee table, and neither of us cared. Then, sometime last spring, her habits shifted. Her phone was always face down, screen black. She told me the glare distracted her during conversations, but I noticed it was never once flipped over by accident. Even when she reached across the counter, even when she was rushing out the door, that phone stayed strategically positioned. Soon after, there was a new passcode. I discovered it the first time I tried to silence her alarm, and the screen flashed, Face ID required. It wasn't our shared code anymore. She brushed it off, claiming her company required stronger security. I wanted to believe her, but then came the silenced notifications. Her phone would light up, but never with banners or previews. Just a muted glow in the dark. She said it was to reduce distractions. Somehow, the reduction never included her smiling at the screen before turning it over again. The money followed the secrecy. Jordan and I had always been open about expenses. Groceries, utilities, dinners, everything was joint, and larger purchases were planned together. But suddenly, ATM withdrawals appeared on our statements. Not huge sums, but regular, $200 here, $300 there. I asked once, and she answered vaguely about needing cash for work-related things or splitting costs with colleagues. Yet we lived in a world where even parking garages took cards. Cash felt outdated, unnecessary, unless one wanted to move unnoticed. Perfume was next. She had always worn light fragrances, subtle, almost forgettable. Then, seemingly overnight, a bold new scent lingered in the air when she left for work. It was heavier, sensual, expensive. I asked about it casually, and she smiled and said it was, for work, just to make an impression in meetings. I nodded, but inside I knew. Jordan had never cared about impressing anyone before. Weekends became battlegrounds of excuses. She began booking dog boarding services out of nowhere, claiming that her schedule might keep her away from home. It's easier on the dog, she said. But I noticed the timing. Always on the weekends I was supposed to be traveling or busy with contracts, always coinciding with vague explanations about team retreats or overnight workshops. Then came the rideshare records. I hadn't checked at first, but once suspicion had rooted in me, I looked. Her receipts told their own story. Rides late at night, heading toward ferry terminals and boutique hotels instead of the office. Trips that ended blocks away from familiar addresses, but not quite at them. Trips that suggested detours, patterns too deliberate to dismiss as coincidence. Social media filled in more pieces. Not her accounts, she was too careful, but her friend Tessa's. Tessa's posts told the truth Jordan never intended me to see. Pictures from a wine bar in Williamsburg, with Jordan's glass raised just out of frame. Stories from Martha's Vineyard, where the beach and the terrace matched places I knew Jordan had mentioned in passing but never invited me to. They were fragments, blurry, but each fragment matched a detail I later uncovered in receipts and records. The financial trail was louder than her words. Credit card charges for restaurants we had never visited together. int asterisk mate, high-end places in neighborhoods we rarely set foot in, boutique shops, romance packages at hotels, tolls for bridges leading out of the city. At first, I thought maybe these were work-related, maybe expenses she forgot to log. But the charges never aligned with her claimed destinations, and they were always tied to weekends or nights she explained away with the same hollow story. Networking. And it wasn't just the numbers. It was her demeanor. Jordan used to share everything. Small jokes about coworkers, frustrations with deadlines, even random observations about traffic. But her openness dried up. She became vague, quick to redirect conversations, eager to cut off topics before they deepened. If I pressed, she would sigh, remind me how busy she was, or act as though I didn't understand the demands of her job. The warmth we once had was replaced with a constant undercurrent of defensiveness. The pattern grew too loud to ignore. Each detail by itself could be explained. A silenced phone, a stronger perfume, a late-night Uber, a dog boarding reservation. But together, they formed a mosaic, one that pointed unmistakably in a single direction. The accidental call at 11:47 wasn't just a slip. It was the missing piece that made every other fragment fall into place. I thought back to moments I had brushed aside. The sudden rush to shower the moment she came home late. The clothes she stuffed into the laundry basket without wearing them twice. The unfamiliar names that appeared in quick flashes on her phone screen before vanishing. Each memory was like a puzzle piece that had been in the wrong box all along, meaningless alone, but when connected to that call, undeniable. The more I looked, the more the image sharpened. And though she tried to drown me in explanations, overwork, exhaustion, the importance of professional image, my instincts refused to settle. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't insecure. I was staring at a map of her choices, one transaction, one ride, one cent at a time. By the end of that week, I realized something chilling. What I had thought of as random oddities weren't random at all. They were breadcrumbs, carefully dropped, leading to the truth she believed I would never bother to follow. But I was following now, and I was no longer looking for reassurance. I was preparing for confirmation. Doubts can be twisted, stretched, and reinterpreted. Suspicions can be explained away, at least for a time, if you are willing to let yourself be convinced. But proof, real proof, doesn't bend. It doesn't negotiate. It just stares back at you with the weight of cold fact. And eventually, that's what I found. It started innocently enough, though nothing about it felt innocent at the time. I had always been the one in our marriage who handled the logistics, bills, subscriptions, backups, passwords. Jordan was careless with tech, forever forgetting credentials. So I kept a spreadsheet and synced our devices to a cloud account we both used. At least, we used to. When she changed her phone settings last year, I assumed she was just trying to organize things. But I never disabled the old backup. One night, restless after reviewing yet another vague excuse she had tossed at me over dinner, I opened that forgotten backup on my laptop. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Maybe reassurance, maybe nothing at all. What I found instead was months of messages. Long threads, neatly archived, between Jordan and someone saved as Blake. The name wasn't familiar, not from her office, not from her stories. But the tone was, int asterisk mate, coded at times, and yet careless in its regularity. They weren't bursts of temptation. They were logistics, hotel confirmations, flight numbers, shared calendars. I'll book the room this time, you cover dinner. Leave your car at the dock. I'll pick you up. Same terrace as last time. Can't wait to see you in that dress. It was all there, documented, time-stamped, undeniable. My chest tightened as I scrolled. Each entry stretched the timeline further back than I wanted to imagine. What I had thought were recent cracks in our marriage were in fact patterns running for months, maybe longer. Their messages lined up with every unexplained withdrawal, every silenced notification, every weekend away from home. It wasn't chance. It was choreography. I clicked through attachments and found photos. Some harmless enough to outsiders. Sunsets, wine glasses, crowded hotel lobbies. But to me, each one carried context. In one, her hair was braided the way she had never worn it for me. taken on a balcony I later recognized from Tessa's social media. In another, his hand half visible across the table. The same watchband that matched a figure I had once glimpsed dropping her off blocks from the house. They hadn't just hidden an affair. They had curated it. And then came the physical evidence, almost too obvious to ignore once I knew where to look. Cleaning out the hall closet, I found a hotel key card slipped into the lining of her tote bag. It bore the logo of a resort near the coast, one I had never visited, but I remembered charges for hospitality services on our shared account that matched the same weekend she claimed to be attending a team-building retreat. Alongside it, tucked into a receipt pocket, was a printed bill. A double room, 3 nights, breakfast for 2 included. 2. Not 1. Not a conference room, not a single occupancy for business. A package tailored for a couple. I stood in the hallway holding that card, that receipt, while the house around me seemed to shrink. It was no longer suspicion. It was evidence. The kind you could slide across a table, the kind no clever explanation could erase. And just when I thought the ground couldn't sink further beneath me, the world outside offered more proof. I opened Instagram again, scrolling not through Jordan's curated feed but through Tessa's, the friend who never knew when to stop posting. There it was. A boomerang of champagne glasses clinking on a seaside terrace. A tag that placed them at Martha's Vineyard. And the frame, the railings, the angle of the view, matched perfectly the photos Jordan and Blake had exchanged privately. In another post, Jordan's silhouette was unmistakable, even if Tessa hadn't tagged her. The dress she wore was the same one Blake had mentioned in their thread. The caption read, "Weekend escapes are the best medicine." My stomach turned. The same weekend Jordan had claimed to be stuck in a strategy session. She was smiling on a terrace with a man who wasn't me. I cross-checked dates, lined up emails, statements, and photos. The puzzle no longer resisted completion. Every piece fit with terrifying precision. The nights she stayed out, they matched the receipts. The toll charges on the car, they led straight to the ferry terminal. The weekends the dog was boarded, they overlapped exactly with hotel bookings. It was more than infidelity. It was structure, design, intent. This wasn't a reckless fling or an impulsive lapse of judgment. It was a second life, funded with shared resources, wrapped in lies delivered with steady eyes and a calm voice at our breakfast table. I thought back to the way she had smiled at me that morning after the accidental call, insisting it was networking, stress, exhaustion. I thought about the careful words, the way she turned the narrative back onto me, as if I were the one failing to trust. And now, with the messages on my screen, with the key card in my pocket, with the images flashing across social media, I realized just how deliberate it all had been. The proof wasn't just undeniable. It was humiliating. It showed me not only that she had chosen someone else, but that she believed I would never connect the dots, that I would stay blind, distracted, pacified by excuses, that I would never dig deep enough to uncover the truth that lay right beneath my feet. But I had dug, and now I was staring at the result. By the time I shut the laptop, my hands were shaking. I placed the key card and the receipt into a folder with printed **TS of the messages. I labeled it, almost mechanically, evidence. Not because I yet knew what I would do with it, but because naming it grounded me. It was no longer a collection of suspicions in my head. It was a case, a reality, something I could not unsee or deny. That night, as Jordan slept beside me, her breathing steady and unaware, I stared at the ceiling in the dark. I knew the difference between suspicion and fact. Suspicion gnawed at you, but it could be soothed with a smile, a clever excuse, a soft hand brushing yours across the table. Fact was immovable, and now it lay between us like a wall I could never climb again. Once the line between suspicion and proof was crossed, my perspective changed entirely. I no longer lived in a fog of uncertainty. The late nights, the new perfume, the secretive phone, those were no longer riddles. They were confirmed lies. But I also knew that simply confronting Jordan with what I had found would be reckless. She was quick, intelligent, and defensive by nature. If I moved too soon, she would twist it, deny it, perhaps even erase evidence before I could act. I needed to be methodical. If our marriage had been built on trust, then what came next would be built on documentation. The first thing I did was create a timeline. I sat at my desk, surrounded by stacks of printouts and notes, and began drawing lines between dates. Her messages to Blake, the receipts from hotels, the Uber rides, the toll charges, every detail was pinned into a chronology. When she had claimed to be in one city, the records showed she was in another. When she said she was working late, her location history placed her near the ferry dock. The more I lined it up, the more undeniable it became. This wasn't sporadic infidelity. It was structured, recurring, almost scheduled. I stored everything outside the house. I bought a small external drive and a fireproof lockbox, placing copies of all files in my office downtown. On my personal cloud account, one Jordan didn't know existed. I mirrored the entire set. **TS of messages, bank statements, photos, even the metadata from her own social media posts. If she ever discovered what I was doing, I wanted her to know she couldn't erase it. I began reaching beyond documents. People noticed more than they admitted, and I realized I could gather testimony without even calling it that. Our neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, often worked late shifts. In casual conversation, I asked if he had seen much movement around our street at night. He chuckled, shaking his head, and then mentioned seeing a sleek sedan, not mine, pulling into our driveway on more than one occasion. "Didn't know you upgraded," he said lightly. My stomach turned, but I nodded, recording the date he mentioned later that night. At the bar down the street, I ran into Gabe, a bartender who had known me for years. Over a beer, I let the conversation drift until he mentioned seeing Jordan there once, laughing loudly with a man he didn't recognize. He remembered it because she had called it a new freedom, something about finally letting herself enjoy life. Gabe thought it was odd, because in all the years he'd seen us together, she'd never described our life that way. His memory stuck with me like a nail in the wall. The hotel was trickier, but persistence worked. I called under the guise of clarifying a charge on our joint account. After a few rounds of polite redirection, I finally reached a manager willing to confirm that Jordan had reserved a double room under her name. The reservation details matched the keycard I had found in her bag. Same dates, same location. He mentioned, almost in passing, that the booking included 2 breakfasts daily. That detail cut sharper than any message thread. It stripped away even the thinnest veil of plausible deniability. Restaurants told similar stories. One evening I stopped by a place I recognized from our statements. A small bistro she had never once suggested we try together. The manager remembered her immediately. "Table for 2, always near the window," he said, smiling at the memory of her visits. "She's been here a few times with the same gentleman. Very polite." His description of the man's watch, sleek, silver with a dark band, matched the one I had seen in Blake's half-visible hand in a photo. Piece by piece, I was building a case. It wasn't just digital shadows anymore. It was eyewitness accounts, receipts, physical objects. It was a body of evidence strong enough that even if Jordan tried to drown it in excuses, it would not wash away. The hardest part was realizing how much of it had been paid with our shared money. Joint accounts, family savings, even funds I had earmarked for home repairs had been siphoned into financing their escapes. Each hotel room, each bottle of wine, each ferry ticket. All of it came from the pool we were supposed to use for building a future together. It wasn't only betrayal of an *Macy. It was theft, dressed as romance. I began to organize the evidence like a lawyer preparing for trial. Folders labeled by month, *TS printed and cross-referenced, testimonies written down verbatim. I kept a journal, recording each new piece as I found it, ensuring there was a contemporaneous record. I felt like an investigator inside my own life, uncovering layers of deceit that had been unfolding under my nose. Sometimes, late at night, I would pause and wonder how I had become this person. Cataloging, archiving, strategizing. I used to believe in confronting problems directly, in speaking the truth, in working things out. But Jordan had taught me that my honesty was a wee *P***N she could turn against me. If I accused without proof, she would deflect, manipulate, make me doubt my own memory. I had learned. Now I wasn't confronting. I was preparing. By the time I looked over the completed timeline, it stretched across nearly a year. A year of hidden trips, secret payments, coordinated lies. A year in which she had built an entire alternate existence, while standing in our kitchen every morning with the same calm face. The scale of it sickened me, but it also hardened me, because now I understood. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was deliberate, and deliberate betrayal required deliberate justice. I closed the final folder, placed it in the lockbox, and felt a cold clarity settle over me. I was no longer gathering suspicions. I was building a foundation, and soon I would decide exactly how to use it. Collecting evidence gave me a strange sense of control, but control without action was only half a victory. Proof sat heavy in folders and lockboxes, but paper by itself doesn't change reality. At some point, you have to step into the fire. And for me, that moment came in Newport, by the marina, where Jordan thought she could enjoy another weekend hidden under the excuse of professional networking. I didn't go alone. I called Marcus, a friend who had known me since college, the kind of man who had stood by me at my wedding and who had later watched, quietly, as I grew more withdrawn over the last year. I told him everything, showed him pieces of the evidence, and asked if he would come with me. Not for confrontation's sake alone, but as a witness, someone who could stand beside me when the truth finally broke open. He agreed without hesitation. We drove up the coast in silence, the kind of silence that holds anticipation like a storm cloud. I clutched the folder with my timeline, the receipts, the printed **TS of messages between Jordan and Blake. My hands sweated on the leather cover, but my mind was clear. This wasn't guesswork anymore. This was execution. The restaurant was easy to find. It was the kind of place Jordan loved. Polished wood interiors, a view of the marina where yachts swayed lazily in the sun, a menu designed for people who never looked at prices. As soon as we walked in, my eyes landed on her. She was seated at a table near the window, the one the manager had once told me she always requested. Beside her sat Blake, the man whose name had haunted my files and whose watch I recognized immediately. They were laughing over a bottle of wine, close enough that their shoulders touched. My chest tightened, but I kept my steps steady. Marcus followed behind me, holding his phone low, recording. My plan wasn't a shouting match, not a scene of rage. My plan was calm exposure. I wanted the truth to drown out every excuse before she could even attempt one. I stopped at their table. Jordan's eyes flicked up, and for a moment, I saw a flash of something raw, fear, shock, the sudden realization that the walls of her constructed world had collapsed. But she masked it quickly, pasting on a smile that trembled at the edges. Blake froze, his hand halfway to his glass. I didn't speak at first. Instead, I laid the folder on the table and slid out the first sheet. A timeline chart, color-coded, with dates, times, and matching evidence. Each entry lined up. Her claimed business events against receipts from hotels, ferry rides, dinners. Her lips parted as if to object, but I placed the next sheet down before she could speak. **TS of her messages with Blake. His words, her responses, their plans for weekends that had supposedly been spent working. Then came the receipts, printed in black and white, hotel bookings for 2 romantic packages, charges from restaurants she had never visited with me. Finally, the photos, the ones from Tessa's social media, overlaid with the ones from the backup. The same terrace, the same outfits, the same dates. The weight of silence pressed down on the table. Jordan's composure crumbled in slow motion. Her smile faltered. Her eyes darted to Blake, then back to me, then to the papers she couldn't deny. Her mouth opened again, but no words came out. Marcus kept recording, the lens steady, capturing every second. The restaurant buzzed around us, oblivious at first, but soon the tension at our table drew glances from nearby diners. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. Finally, Jordan tried to speak. Her words were thin, fragile, an echo of her old defenses. This is all a misunderstanding. You don't know the context. It's just... But the stack of papers on the table contradicted her with every turn of the page. She stopped halfway through her sentence, realizing even as she spoke that the effort was useless. Blake shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. He reached for the wineglass again but then set it down without drinking. His silence was admission enough. He knew as well as I did that their cover was gone. I leaned in slightly, my voice low but firm. No more networking. No more excuses. This is what you've built, Jordan. This is the truth. Her shoulders sagged. The defiance drained out of her like air from a punctured balloon. She didn't cry, didn't beg. Not yet. She simply stared at the documents as though they were a foreign language she couldn't read. Her face pale under the warm restaurant lighting. I gathered the papers back into the folder, leaving only one page on the table, a copy of the hotel bill that had 2 breakfasts listed. It felt fitting to leave her with the simplest, most irrefutable detail. Then I stood, Marcus still filming beside me, and turned to leave. The entire encounter lasted less than 10 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime compressed into a single scene. No shouting, no drama, just the quiet devastation of evidence laid bare. A confrontation not of words, but of facts. As we walked out, the marina air hit me like a wave. My body trembled, adrenaline rushing through me, but my mind was calm. I had done it. I had forced the truth into the open, in a place where she couldn't hide behind carefully chosen phrases or half-smiles. For Jordan, the evening ended not in romance, not in secrecy, but in silent collapse under the weight of her own lies. For me, it marked the end of doubt. From that moment forward, the path was no longer about discovery. It was about resolution. I sent the entire dossier to Blake's wife and to his company's compliance office. Within weeks, he was dismissed, contracts unraveled, and his polished image evaporated. Jordan's attorney tried to spin a narrative of emotional neglect, but the dates, receipts, and testimony shattered it. She caved, signing terms that left me with the house, savings, and business, while she walked away with little more than her clothes. Months later, Jordan worked as a cashier in a nearby town, her former life erased. I repaired the house, grew my contracting business, and began quietly seeing Emily, a teacher whose kindness felt steady and real. I wasn't seeking revenge anymore. I was reclaiming balance. Jordan's betrayal had stripped away illusions, but it also gave me clarity. I no longer lived in shadows of networking nights. I lived in truth and, for the first time in years, in peace.